The last two items that I have for discussion are related to reductions as well as upcoming potential levy issue, and I'm going to combine those two items even though they're listed as separate in my presentation and discussion this evening. So Craig, if you could go ahead and share that presentation. I broke the presentation up on reductions into two sections. My goal tonight is to make sure that there's clarification and understanding in regards to what's happening with the reductions. I know it can be confusing because we've had two phases of reductions, and in both phases we've been talking about similar amounts. So first, I want to talk about where we were at after the November 23 failure that occurred at the beginning of this school year. It's important to note that as I go through the information this evening, that all of the reductions that I'm presenting and recommending to the board this evening are all based off of a potential 7.5 mil levy going on the ballot this coming up November. So as we worked through decisions related to the reductions, those are the premises we worked under in making the decisions that we're sharing with the board this evening. We worked on under those parameters based off of the conversation and discussion that we had at our work session just a week ago. So again, this is with the assumption that a 7.5 mil emergency levy, length to be determined, would be placed on the ballot on November 2024. So the first round of reductions was or is approximately $2 million. And that goes into effect for next school year. These reductions needed to happen, but were mandated by the state, by the Department of Education, and they were because of our 5-year forecast. They base it off the third year of the 5-year forecast, which showed that we were going to have negative dollars. We needed to show that we could get those dollars into the positive, which unfortunately really the only way to do that or make those substantial changes in a public school system are through reductions. Our number one expenditure is in personnel. We are in a people business, and everything that we do, our product is children. Educating children, and it takes the resources and skills, abilities of people to be able to do that, and that's the educators throughout our district, and I'm referring to our administrators, our support staff, as well as our teachers. So we were able to work through reductions of administrators as well as the attrition of support staff and teachers in order to get to the $2 million mark. Attrition is not replacing positions of individuals that are leaving the district. Most of these are due to retirement. Many of these, or most of these reductions were able to occur because of the redistricting process that's happening next year. So with the closure or the changing of two buildings, that allowed for consolidation of staffing positions and reassignment of many staffing positions, which allowed us to implement these reductions. So the next slide shows you what the specific reductions actually are. So this is, I believe, the most specific information that we've shared thus far. This was actually in the precaution report, but the other information in terms of the second round of reductions is going to be similar and is more specific than we've shared up to this point. But we're looking at 3 administrator positions, 14 certificated positions, which is teaching positions, well as 4 support staff positions, to come to a total of approximately $2 million, which did get the third year of that spending into the positive. So then we made the decision to go back on the ballot in March, and were unfortunately not successful. Therefore, we are in a position where we needed to look at an increased amount of reductions, as well as have discussion about going on the ballot. And thus, the result of last week's work session was talk around a 7.5 mil emergency in November. We need to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible and financially sustainable in what we're doing. So we need to look at more reductions, even with the potential passage of the levy. And based off the 7.5 mil levy on the ballot, that would be approximately $2 million in additional reductions for the district going into next year. So that's how we came to that dollar amount. If we were to look at a smaller levy in November, it would require a larger amount of reductions. If we were to look at a levy that wasn't going on the ballot in November but was going on later the following year, it would require an even larger amount of reductions because we would be losing a year of collection. Just like if we go on the ballot in November and it doesn't pass, it would also require a large amount of reductions because a year's loss of collection. So this time around, we try every opportunity we have, and we will continue to as we move through the school year. So there's a little bit of fluctuation in this process to do things through attrition as much as we can, because we've got outstanding people that work in our district. We are a place that people want to come and be a part of, and we want to keep those individuals here as much as we can. But unfortunately, with the level of reductions that we've already made, it's becoming very challenging to make all of those reductions simply through attrition. So we are looking at a reduction in force across the board, potentially. In addition to that, we're also exploring other avenues for reductions moving forward. There we go. So the breakdown of the reductions due to the March 24 levy failure is an additional administrator position, which is a position at the board office level, 8 additional teaching positions, and 18 support staff positions. And in addition to that, we're also looking at coaching co-curriculars, as well as other co-curricular positions. And when I talk about other co-curricular positions, those are supplemental contracts for things such as additional contracts that employees get to do curriculum work, to coordinate and run and support other clubs and programs such as K-Kids and Hope Squad that you saw this evening, to student council. Those are what supplemental or co-curricular contracts are. We're also looking at reductions to budgets across the board, departmental budgets as well as building budgets. The main reduction with the budgets to the building budgets listed here has to do with professional development and decreasing professional development dollars at the building level, which would provide less flexibility for principals in terms of working with their staff with professional development. At this time, I cannot get into specifics in terms of the positions other than what I've already shared. We do have additional work that we need to do in working with our associations in terms of notifying individuals, and we want to make sure we not only honor our contracts, but we're also fair to the employees that this will impact or may impact moving forward. And I'm hoping that following tonight, we will be able to move fairly quickly in getting notifications out, but it will be no later than April 30th. And as a board, we will have more discussion about personnel in executive session where it's appropriate. Also want to talk about pay to participate. We have 2 sets of pay to participate fees that our parents currently pay. I think the obvious one is the athletic pay to participate fees. Those are currently approximately $330 and include a family cap. I think Dr. Kwolek had shared at our work session that in doing research of other districts, that districts that have pay to participate fees in place, many of them, their goal is to have a 50-50 split with parents or families. And we were actually not even close to that 50-50 split. In the past, parents were paying approximately 22.4%, where the district was paying 77.6%. So the goal is to increase pay to participate fees. We're looking at a level approximately of doubling them, about $660 per sport, as well as eliminating the family cap. So there would no longer be a family cap in place. That doesn't get us to the 50-50 split, but it gets us much closer to the 50-50 split. I also want to mention that these pay to participate fees, and it is a common question, well, what do these go for? These pay for transportation and they pay for the supplemental contracts. So they pay for the coaches, and they pay for the fuel and the bus drivers and the buses, which can be much more costly than people realize, especially the transportation component. The second piece that we looked at are pay to participate fees in our music programs. Currently, our music programs pay to participate fees are approximately $100. I think they might be slightly higher in some of the music programs, depending on what they are. This is an area where we as well would be looking to double that fee to get it closer to that 50% mark. And just like athletics, again, it's covering those supplemental contracts. We do have similar supplemental contracts within our music programming for our directors to run those outside of the school day activities, as well as all the transportation that goes along with transporting our students to the various competitions, shows, and events that they participate in as part of these programs. So the total reductions, so we have 2 sets of approximately $2 million in reductions. So the combined amount of reductions going into next year, so again, I want to emphasize these are all implemented for next school year, are 4 administrative positions, 22 teaching positions, 22 support staff positions, in addition to coaching co-curriculars and regular co-curriculars, as well as budgetary cuts. From a personnel perspective, just the breakdown on the impact of the ratios, a big thing people talk about, or you see if you go to the Ohio Department's website, is your student to teacher ratios or your student to administrator ratios. So the overall impact on our district is approximately a 10% administrator reduction, 4.8% teacher reduction, and a 7% support staff reduction. One thing I do want to point out with the support staff reduction, because I know when I look at that, I see, wow, that's a lot of our support staff, and that's concerning. But what I want to point out with that is to remind that we are transitioning to buildings that are no longer necessarily going to need aides in them, full-time kitchen staff. So those reductions were able to be absorbed, where with our teaching staff it's a little bit different because we've worked on reassigning them with students, where that didn't have to be the case with the support staff. I do want to commend Chris and Jim because, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but I think they managed to work through all those classified support staff reductions all through attrition. And that was very purposeful. That was through not filling positions throughout the course of the school year that we normally would have been filling, knowing that we were in a position to make these kinds of decisions. So I want to see if there's any questions or further conversation regarding the information that I presented this evening. One last thing I did want to share that's important as well, that I don't want to forget to mention, is all of the reductions that we're recommending right now, they are cumulative. So when I say $8 million in reductions going into next year, that accumulates over the next 4 or 5 years. So these are not things that we are looking at bringing back or refilling. So it'll be then 16 million going into year 2. Keep compounding to provide more of a savings for the school district over time. And our goal right now was to make reductions that could be long-term, not things that we would be looking to bring back with the passage of a levy. So again, it's the continued philosophy that we had used with the precaution report to do our best to sustain district programming as much as we can. If we don't have a levy in November, or if a levy does not pass in November, we will no longer be in a situation where it would be close to impossible to be able to do that anymore, just because of the financial situation that we'll be in. In addition, the board does not need to take action on these reductions. These are administrative moves that we're making, especially the ones through attrition and just not recommending new people for the positions. However, with any reductions in force, those are positions that we will be presenting to the board, I believe, at the May meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Sable. I appreciate that we are able to make these reductions without having to directly impact programming. As we've talked about, it's taken a long time to bring back those programming opportunities, and once they're gone, it's hard to bring those things back. I did have a question about the co-curriculars, though. Are those primarily like enrichment type activities at the schools, or if you could, a little more detail about those?
We'll discuss it more in executive session because it impacts specific individuals when we don't fill some of those contracts. But just generally speaking, yes, they're co-curricular type contracts.
I have a question, and you talk in this about November 2024 levy, and I finally received information from the State Department of Taxation about income tax. And it would be an earned income tax similar to what the city of Medina has. So that would exempt anyone who is on a pension or Social Security. And if we just use, and these again are estimates because I don't know exactly, a 1% income tax would net us, or we would get roughly, I'm in here, $17 million. And it would not affect any senior, which I think we've heard over and over. And most of my emails that I got was, I've lived here my whole life. I can't afford that amount of money. I don't want to move, and I don't want to go to a rest home, which we don't want you to go to a rest home either. But I know I asked Mr. Chambers to give us the pros and cons, and so do you have that?
I do have that, yes. If Craig could pull that up for me, that'd be great. Basically, what Ms. Pritchard gave was received was a listing of income tax amounts and how much they would generate. They listed both traditional and earned income taxes. A traditional income tax is based on modified adjusted gross income, and it's for everybody. Basically, it's calculated on the adjusted gross income for anybody that lives in the school district, because as a school district income tax, it affects those that live in the school district, not those that work in the school district. So it basically is limited to individuals in Medina City Schools. Then you have your earned income tax. Your earned income tax is on employee compensation. So that will hit just employees who have net earnings. It also hits self-employment up to your adjusted gross income. She gave you what 1% would provide the district. I was looking more at trying to where we'd be in line with what our 7.5 mil ask is. So I was looking at a 0.75% traditional income tax, which would generate roughly $16 million, or an 0.875% earned income tax, which would generate $15 million. Let's see here. How do we do this? What we also have, as she said, was we were looking at pros and cons. So an earned income tax would not affect retirees, as she says. There's also the fact that with our retirees, I was asking Mr. Shields this the other day, our retirees, when we put this on the ballot back in 2011, we were probably at a 50-50 retiree to working class population. Now I believe we're at, and this is only my guess, I haven't looked at any numbers here, but my guess is we're at approximately 60-40, where 60% of our population is retirees. So I know that's why Ms. Pritchard is looking at an earned income tax. The tax revenue would increase as salaries increase. So when the salaries for anybody working in the district increases, we will get more money. And also, this would place the schools, and this is important for us, it would place the schools on the same side of the taxing issue as the city and the county, because right now, school districts are the whipping post of any I want to say it, economic development incentive, because what the city and the county do, because they're allowed to do, is reduce income tax or exempt income tax, or sorry, not income tax, exempt property tax from new developments. Of course, there's guidelines to everything that they have there. They could do it up to, I believe it's 15 years. But that means we're not receiving any property tax for those 15 years. But on the other side, the city's receiving income tax, the county is receiving, possibly getting developments in here for new residential properties. So it is a win for the city, it's a win for the school district as we get new people coming in. Now on the other side, we have the cons. And in the cons, we have that income tax earnings are volatile. And the reason for that is we've seen it before. We've seen it here in 2008, 2009. The economy was way down. And as the economy is way down, so are your income tax collections. because it means people are losing jobs, people are out of work, people are, the money's not there anymore. Also, your funding takes time to ramp up. That means when we set the income tax, if we put it here at November's levy, we won't be receiving that $19 million until approximately a year and a half or 2 years in. And the reason for that is because income tax takes time to, one, collect, and two, to bring everybody on board collecting that. And that's why it takes time to ramp up. Now, I said that the city is infringing on our property taxes when they set up an income tax. I don't want to be the one calling the kettle black and saying, let's do an income tax, because we'd be infringing on the city's tax collections. And we heard it with the sales tax here, that when the school districts got sales tax, we had a commissioner complain about it for the next 10 years, that sales tax, the school district income tax, is infringing on the county's right for sales tax. So I don't want to have that happening with the city and their taxation. You also have income tax really affects your low income tax earners. Even though they're paying less than your high earners, they are working paycheck to paycheck here. And as you take more and more out of their paycheck, it means that they are not going to be able to do simple, basic stuff that everybody needs to do. Also, here in the state of Ohio, we only have 1/3 of the school districts that do have a school district income tax. We do have one here in Medina. It is Cloverleaf. I believe they had a 10-year income tax that is falling off this year, and now they passed a continuous income tax. So their 10-year income tax, I looked it up again this afternoon, was at 0.75. Their continuous is at 0.5. So again, they are the only ones in Medina County. Voters, I look at my paycheck. I mean, my people make out my paycheck, and I still look at my paycheck on a biweekly basis. So I look to see that things are in line there. And voters will be reminded that the school district has an income tax. They'll be reminded every pay. So it's not, unless you think about passing a continuous income tax, it will be there every week or 2 weeks or a month, depending on when they get their paycheck. So that'll be there in their minds. So I just like to say that's a con there. And then also, the last thing, voters did reject a 0.5% income tax back in 2011 by a 58 to 42% margin.
So you're opposed?
Yes, somewhat opposed.
Well, I guess I would say this. I mean, that we are hearing over and over. I mean, we know this is going to be a tough election cycle because of all the craziness surrounding the presidential election and other things. I really, and the fact that our community is aging. And one of the things I've heard from Cloverleaf's treasurer and from Keith Durham, the finance person in Medina City, is that, for example, if your property tax goes up, you are always going to have to pay that property tax. If you don't get overtime, then your salary is going to be, your salary is lower, and therefore your income tax will be lower. I'm just trying to think of a way that we can get this passed so we do not have to make draconian cuts for our kids and for our staff. And that's what I'm looking at. And I don't know whether we can do it in enough time, but I think Ms. Parkhurst said something about trying to wrap out a survey or something to try to see what we could do.
I mean, that's something we could do if we wanted to send something out to the community. We could talk to Mr. Sable and Ms. Busby to see what the community thinks about an income tax versus property tax levy. I do have a concern. I know we've had a challenging time trying to eliminate disinformation and misinformation, and there's still a lot of people out there that I don't think understand exactly what a property tax levy is. I'm concerned that if we throw this into the mix, that might cause more confusion. Just a thought.
Dave, is the timeline the same for board resolution with the income as it is with the, I'm just curious what,
In all honesty, I don't know the answer to that.
okay. So that's something we need to figure out.
Correct.
Can I ask a nuts and bolts question? You mentioned 875 on an earned income would be equivalent to what we were looking at for the levy. Somebody making $50,000, what would that be a year for them?
$437.50.
I figured it was about that, but I wanted to make sure I was doing my math right.
Yep.
So $437.
If they maintain that salary, I'm concerned also about the volatility. That we're not guaranteed that amount that was calculated because of changes in income. It could go up, but it could go down, and that makes it challenging for planning purposes.
Well, that's why if we went with a little bit higher amount, even if the salaries dropped, we would still, and they'd have to drop, I think they would have to drop drastically. We still would have money to do it. My thinking is, levy hasn't passed twice, and I personally think that this is just a better option. At least we know we're protecting the seniors. And right now they're the voting populace out there.
Yeah, I think we would have to go for a higher amount because the collection ramps up later, so it would impact the collection timing.
Right. Yeah, we'll get some in April, and then it's after that, and it says it takes 6 cycles for it to come up again. But if we make the cuts of $2 million for this, I think eventually we would see. And my other point is, if this works out, and I'm not saying to make it a forever thing at this point, because we can pick how many years we want. Maybe in 3 to 5 years we don't have to ask for another levy or a very small levy, because we know we're going to have to go back out to the voters in a short period of time. So that's the only reason I'm bringing it up. I just think I think it's a legitimate option. So that's all I have to say. Do you guys have anything you want to say, son?
Oh, I'm just a thinker. No, I mean, I think it is a different avenue that we can go at. I'm not for or against it necessarily right now, but I would want more input from the rest of the community before we start doing that. Because just looking at it, like Andrew, for the $50,000 a year, how much comes out? Right, $400 and some dollars. That's about as much as $200,000 appraised value home, right? And that's a single income. And I understand you have to make up the money someplace for the money that wouldn't be getting input by the seniors. But we're creating a whole nother, I guess, wage disparity within our community. By demanding more from people with less, which I understand that was one of Dave's cons. But for me, yeah, the biggest thing is thinking about that and other Other than that, just input from the community, because I think this is a big step that will affect a lot of families, and just a lot of people that are working in general, which I understand the levy would too, as is. But I don't know that, tonight, not that we're trying to make a decision tonight, but tonight I could say, oh yeah, I'm all on board for this.
Yeah, I would suggest that, I think we need to get more information in terms of timing. I think that's a big thing. The good news, if it has to go on the ballot, I don't know, but I'm guessing we're probably looking at a similar time frame as we would for.
Yeah, I would think
Yeah.
similar, because the only
So
thing
we have
that-
some time to work through things and have some conversation.
Right, the only thing that takes earlier time is bonds, because those have to, they have to certify the bond, and then it has to go through the state too, so.
Just some thoughts. I think this definitely requires some further investigation, but I think this is a really big ask for the 40% of the wage earners in Medina that aren't retired. And I think it's going to be a really big ask, much bigger than a property tax increase when you look at it. That's just back of the napkin spitball, but some investigation and some examples will, what do I want to say, vet that out. So it's just a comment.
Yeah, I agree that it's going to be confusing to voters. However, I know the comments have come across stating that, I don't have kids in the schools and so forth. So that has been, as Mrs. Pritchard said, it's been very apparent that that is what a lot of the senior citizens have stated. They own property, most of them do, so that is going to affect them. It's a tough one. I'm kind of torn in between both of them.
Well, no matter what, I mean, whatever we do, you realize that somebody who makes $50,000 is not going to have a kid on a baseball team or a football team or any other activity. So we already are setting ourselves up that participation is going to drop, okay, in our sports, or they're going to go elsewhere to get their sports where they don't have to pay as much. So basically, we are making athletics for the rich right now in our cuts. So, and I mean, the whole community comes out and supports, the events, but the reality is, yeah, all right, we can say we're going to double it because we have 1,100 kids participating in sports, but when they get that first bill of $660, we're going to be down to about 800 kids playing sports, if not more. And same with music. There's, music allows kids who, that's their creative outlet, and, they've taken their lessons, whatever. But they just, that is their one thing, and their parents can't do it. And a lot of, it just is something that I think we really need to think about, because I don't want to keep kids out of any activity that we have because of the cost. And I also don't want senior citizens to feel they have to move out of Medina. So that's kind of where I'm coming from at this point. I was asked by one voter to think outside the box. And so this was my outside the box. This is a way. I mean, I would love to have a bake sale where we could raise $14 million, but the reality is we're not raising that kind of money. And people say, well, find other ways to do it. Well, I would love to do that for you, but I don't know. I mean, if you want me to give up my salary for this job, I'll gladly give it up if you want to vote for whatever, but it's not going to change. It's not going to turn the tide. So I just think we need to think what is obviously best for our community. If we can get a survey, that would be great. But I just think we need to look other ways to get money. And I do want to point out that I did invite Representative Sharon Ray here today to explain funding. You can see she's not here. So Kids First has plenty of information on what her associate sends out whenever you have a question. So anyways, that's all my comments for right now. I'm sure I'll have others, but anyways.
I just wanted to add just a couple things to follow up. I think it's important for the community to know too that when we don't make these cuts lightly, but we are doing our part. We're not just there with our hand out asking for more money. We are doing what we can to make cuts that won't impact our students too much. So I think that's important to point out. And regarding athletics, I agree. We try to keep things affordable for our students. It sounds like we would be more in line with surrounding communities in terms of getting the pay to participate up to a 50-50, as well as we have currently programs in place that help our students who are not able to afford the current fees. There are scholarships and opportunities to help them participate, and I would anticipate that those would remain as well.
Anything else, Mr. Salem?
I
Nope,
got one
that's it.
thing. I just wanted to add on that, you know, I like that we have this option in front of us. I like that we're having a conversation about it. It is something that's outside of the box. It is something that's different. It is something that I think at some point we should definitely consider, whether it's, you know, this election cycle or it's something later. But I do want to make a point that by next meeting, we need to have our decision for the November levy, vote on it and get moving with it, because the levy committees and bringing information to the community, it needs time to get out there. We saw the November to March turnover. It was like a mad dash. It was a full-on sprint. And the more time that we can give with hard details on this is what we're looking to do in November, the better off we'll be also. Not saying that, you know, it will or won't push it across the line, but time is always valuable when you're looking at getting stuff like this taken care of.
Thanks, Mr. Nichols.